Welcome to Zain Soul Stories, where every story touches the heart and every silent hide are painful stories.
Dennis sat at the kitchen table, the small gold band catching the dim light from the overhead bulb. His hands trembled as he turned the wedding ring between his fingers, feeling the worn smoothness that 3 years of marriage had etched into the metal. Outside, rain hammered against the window like an angry fist demanding entry. The eviction notice lay spread before him, red letters screaming 48 hours. His daughter Emma slept in the next room, her small body curled under blankets that had seen better days. The ring felt heavier than it should, weighted down by memories of Sarah's smile on their wedding day, her last breath in the hospital, and every promise he'd made to her. Dennis closed his eyes and felt a tear slide down his cheek. 3 years ago, Dennis had been a different man. He'd worked construction, came home dirty but smiling, kissed his wife, and played with baby Emma until bedtime. Sarah had worked as a nurse, and together they'd built a simple but happy life. Then cancer came like a thief, stealing Sarah's strength first, then her time, and finally her life. Dennis had watched her fade in that hospital bed, holding her hand while Emma gurgled in the nursery, too young to understand. After Sarah died, Dennis tried to keep going, but medical bills had devoured their savings. His mother helped when she could, but she lived on a fixed income herself. Now, 8 months behind on rent, Dennis had nothing left to sell except the symbol of the only love he'd ever known. Emma's voice cut through his thoughts like sunshine through storm clouds. "Daddy, I'm hungry." She stood in the doorway, clutching the stuffed rabbit Sarah had sewn for her brown eyes wide and trusting. Dennis quickly pocketed the ring and forced a smile. "Coming right up, princess." He made scrambled eggs with the last 3 eggs in the fridge, watching Emma eat with the intensity only a 4-year-old could manage. She didn't know they might be homeless by Friday. She didn't know her father had been skipping meals so she could eat. She chattered about the imaginary tea party she'd have with her toys, and Dennis memorized every word, every gesture, burning it into his memory like a photograph. After breakfast, he called his mother to watch Emma. The pawn shop squatted between a laundromat and a check-cashing place, its neon sign flickering weakly in the gray morning light. Dennis had walked past it 100 times, never imagining he'd enter. Inside, the smell of desperation hung thick. A teenage boy pawned a video game console. An elderly woman sold china that probably belonged to her grandmother. Behind bulletproof glass, the clerk looked bored, unmoved by the parade of broken dreams. When Dennis placed the ring on the counter, his hand shook so badly the ring rattled against the worn laminate. The clerk examined it through a jeweler's loupe, his face expressionless. $150. Dennis felt his stomach drop. "It's worth at least 500. The clerk shrugged. "Take it or leave it." Dennis stood frozen, his mind calculating with desperate speed. The rent was $1,200. He had $400 saved from odd jobs. With $150 from the ring, he'd still be short. But it was something. It bought him time to figure out the rest. "Can you do 200? His voice cracked. The clerk didn't even look up. $150. Final offer. Dennis thought of Emma's face, her trust, her innocence. He thought of Sarah's voice on her deathbed. "Take care of our baby girl." He swallowed hard, tasting bile and defeat. "Okay." The clerk counted out the bills with mechanical efficiency, then tossed the ring into a tray with dozens of others. Just another piece of forgotten gold. Dennis walked out with the money burning in his pocket and a hole in his heart where the ring had been. For the next 2 days, Dennis worked like a man possessed. He took every odd job he could find, hauling trash, painting fences, cleaning gutters. His body ached, his hands blistered, but he pushed through. By Thursday evening, he'd scraped together another $300. Still short. He stood outside his landlord's office, the $950 in his pocket, rehearsing what he'd say. Mr. Peterson was a hard man, but maybe, just maybe, he'd accept partial payment and a promise for the rest. Dennis knocked. No answer. He tried the handle. Locked. A note taped to the door read, "Out of town until Monday." Dennis felt panic claw up his throat. Monday would be too late. The eviction was set for Friday at noon. That night, Dennis couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the building settling around him. In the next room, Emma breathed softly in her sleep, innocent and safe in her dreams. What would he tell her tomorrow? Where would they go? The shelter was full. He'd already called. His mother's apartment was too small, barely enough room for herself. Dennis felt like he was drowning in air, his chest tight, his mind racing through scenarios that all ended in failure. At 11:30, he got up and made coffee he couldn't afford, just to have something to do with his shaking hands. He thought about Sarah, wondering what she would say, what she would do. He felt so utterly alone. At exactly midnight, 3 sharp knocks echoed through the apartment. Dennis froze, coffee cup halfway to his lips. Who would knock at this hour? Debt collectors didn't work midnight shifts. Fear mixed with curiosity as he approached the door, checking first that Emma's door was closed. He looked through the peephole and saw a woman standing in the hallway. She wore a long dark coat, her silver hair pulled back, her face somehow both strange and familiar. He opened the door with the chain still attached. "Can I help you?" His voice was rough with exhaustion and suspicion. The woman's eyes, a striking shade of blue, studied him carefully. "Are you Dennis?" Her voice was soft, but carried weight. "I knew your wife, Sarah. May I come in?" Dennis's heart hammered against his ribs. He unhooked the chain with trembling fingers and opened the door wider. The woman stepped inside, moving with quiet grace. Up close, she looked to be in her 60s, with kind eyes that held deep sadness. "Who are you?" Dennis asked, his voice barely a whisper. The woman extended her hand. "My name is Margaret. I worked with Sarah at the hospital. I was her supervisor." Dennis shook her hand, his mind reeling. Sarah had mentioned Margaret a few times, always with respect and affection. "It's very late," Dennis said, confusion mixing with a strange hope he didn't understand. Margaret nodded. "I apologize for the hour. I've been trying to find you for weeks. Your old number was disconnected, and the hospital had an outdated address." Margaret reached into her coat and pulled out a manila envelope, worn at the edges as if handled many times. "Before Sarah passed, she gave me something. She made me promise to only give it to you if you ever truly needed it. She said I would know when that time came." Dennis stared at the envelope like it might bite. "How did you know I needed it now?" Margaret's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I saw you at the pawn shop this morning. I was there selling some old jewelry of my own. When I saw you place that wedding ring on the counter, the way your hands shook, the look in your eyes, I knew. Sarah told me that ring meant everything to you. She said you'd never part with it unless you were desperate." Dennis took the envelope with numb fingers. His name was written on the front in Sarah's handwriting, the sight of it like a punch to the gut. He hadn't seen her writing in so long. His vision blurred as tears filled his eyes. "What is this?" Margaret touched his arm gently. "I don't know. She sealed it before giving it to me. She only said that it was for your future, for Emma's future." Dennis sank onto the couch, the envelope clutched against his chest. Margaret sat beside him, patient and silent. Finally, with shaking hands, Dennis opened it. Inside was a letter folded around a bank slip. He unfolded the letter first, and Sarah's words reached across death to speak to him. "My dearest Dennis, if you're reading this, then you need help, and I can't be there to give it." Dennis read through tears that fell onto the paper, blurring some of Sarah's words. "I know how hard you'll try to be strong. I know you'll sacrifice everything for Emma. That's who you are, and it's one of the million reasons I love you. But I need you to know that it's okay to accept help. It's okay to lean on what I'm leaving behind. When my grandmother passed away, she left me a small inheritance. I never told you about it because I was saving it for something special. I put it in an account for Emma's education, but I'm giving Margaret access in case of emergency. Dennis, you and Emma are my everything. Please use this money to take care of yourself and our daughter. Don't let pride stop you. And please, please know that I love you beyond death, beyond time, beyond everything. Dennis's hands shook so badly he could barely unfold the bank slip. Margaret gently took it from him and read it aloud. Account balance, $24,300. The number hung in the air like a miracle. Dennis couldn't breathe, couldn't think. $24,000. It was more money than he'd seen in years. Enough to pay the rent, buy food, catch up on bills, maybe even get ahead for once. I don't understand, he whispered. Why didn't Sarah tell me? Margaret smiled sadly. She wanted to, but she got sick so fast. By the time she realized she might not make it, she was so weak. She told me she kept meaning to tell you, but there was never the right time, and then there was no time at all. Dennis doubled over, sobs tearing from his chest in great heaving gasps. All the fear, the exhaustion, the grinding desperation of the past months came pouring out. Margaret put her arm around his shoulders and let him cry. This broken man who'd been trying so hard to hold everything together. She saved us, Dennis choked out between sobs. Even after she's gone, she's still saving us. Margaret's own tears fell silently. That's what love does. It reaches beyond the grave. It provides. It protects. They sat like that for long minutes. Two people united by grief and love for a woman who'd left the world too soon. Finally, Dennis straightened, wiping his eyes. How do I access the account? Margaret pulled papers from her bag, everything already prepared. Sarah set it up so I could transfer it to you in case of need. I'll need your signature, your ID, and a few other things. The money can be in your account by tomorrow afternoon. Dennis looked at this woman, this angel who'd appeared at midnight carrying salvation. Why did you wait until now? Why not come sooner? Margaret's expression grew thoughtful. Sarah was very specific. She said you'd never accept help unless you absolutely needed it. She said you had to hit bottom first, or your pride would make you refuse. She knew you, Dennis. She knew you'd try to handle everything alone. Dennis laughed bitterly. She was right. If you'd come last week, I probably would have said no. As the initial shock faded, a new emotion crept in, guilt. Dennis looked at Margaret with haunted eyes. I sold our wedding ring, the symbol of everything we had. I sold it for $150 like it meant nothing. His voice broke. What kind of man does that? Margaret gripped his hands firmly. A desperate father does that. A man who loves his daughter more than a piece of metal does that. Dennis, do you think Sarah would be angry? Dennis shook his head, tears flowing again. She'd understand. She always understood. Margaret smiled. Then forgive yourself. That ring was just gold. The real marriage, the real love, it's in your heart, in Emma, in the life you're building for her. That can't be pawned or sold. After Margaret left, promising to return in the morning with the final papers, Dennis stood in Emma's doorway, watching her sleep. The first gray light of dawn crept through the window, touching her face with gentle fingers. She looked so much like Sarah, the same nose, the same stubborn set to her jaw even in sleep. We're going to be okay, princess, Dennis whispered. Your mama made sure of it. He thought about the journey that had brought him to this moment. Sarah's death, the mounting bills, the desperate scramble to survive, the soul-crushing decision to sell his ring. Every step had been agony, but it had led here, to this moment of grace, this unexpected salvation. Dennis finally understood what Sarah had known. Sometimes you had to fall completely before you could accept the hand reaching down to lift you up. Emma woke to the smell of pancakes, real pancakes with syrup, not the usual oatmeal or toast. She padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, what's the special occasion?" Dennis scooped her up, holding her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair. "We got a miracle, baby girl. Your mama sent us a miracle." Emma pulled back to look at his face, confused but smiling at his joy. "Mama's in heaven," she said matter-of-factly. "How can she send miracles from there?" Dennis's throat tightened. "Because love doesn't stop, sweetie. Love keeps going forever, and it finds ways to take care of the people it loves." Emma seemed to consider this, then nodded seriously. "Okay, can I have chocolate chips in my pancakes?" Dennis laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "Yes, yes, you absolutely can." After breakfast, Dennis left Emma with his mother and headed back to the pawn shop. The clerk looked up with vague recognition. "Back already? Buyer's remorse doesn't work here." Dennis placed $200 on the counter. "I want my ring back." The clerk raised an eyebrow. "It's $200 to buy it back, plus a 10% service fee." Dennis added another 20 without hesitation. The clerk shrugged, went to the back, and returned with the ring. The moment Dennis slipped it back onto his finger, he felt a piece of himself click back into place. It was just gold, just metal, but it was his gold, his metal, his connection to the woman he'd loved. Walking out of that pawn shop felt like victory, like resurrection, like coming home. By Friday afternoon, the money was in Dennis's account. He paid the rent in full, plus the next 3 months in advance. Mr. Peterson, back from his trip, was shocked. "Dennis, I was about to start eviction proceedings." Dennis just smiled. "I know, but we're good now." With the immediate crisis handled, Dennis sat down and made a plan. He'd use the money wisely. Catch up on all bills, build an emergency fund, get Emma some new clothes, and maybe fix the car that had been sitting broken for 6 months. But he also thought about Margaret, about her kindness. He called her that evening. "Margaret, can I take you to dinner?" "To say thank you." Her warm laugh filled the phone. "Dennis, you don't owe me anything." "Please," he insisted. "Let me do this." They met at a small Italian restaurant on Saturday evening. Dennis had brought Emma, who charmed Margaret instantly with her chatter about her stuffed animals and imaginary friends. Over pasta and breadsticks, Margaret shared stories about Sarah at work, painting a picture of his wife that Dennis had never fully seen. "She was the best nurse I ever supervised," Margaret said, her eyes distant with memory. Not because of her technical skills, though those were excellent, but because she truly cared. Every patient was a person to her, not a case number. Dennis listened, hungry for these glimpses of Sarah's life outside their home. Emma fell asleep against his shoulder as the evening wore on, and Margaret smiled. "You're doing a wonderful job with her, Dennis. Sarah would be so proud." The following weeks brought changes. Dennis enrolled in night classes at the community college, studying to become an electrician, a career with better pay and stability than construction. His mother watched Emma on class nights, delighted to spend more time with her granddaughter. Dennis started eating regular meals again, feeling his strength return. He took Emma to the park, to the library, to the children's museum she'd always wanted to visit. He saw his daughter bloom with the security of knowing they were safe. He made a point to visit Margaret once a week, these visits becoming a cherished routine. She'd become like a surrogate mother, a living link to Sarah. One evening, she gave him a photo album. "I found this cleaning out old files. Pictures from the hospital charity events. Sarah's in several of them." That night, after Emma was asleep, Dennis sat down with a pen and paper. He needed to say things, even if the only one who'd hear them was himself. "Dear Sarah," he wrote, "I don't know if you can read this wherever you are, but I need to write it anyway. I was so angry when you died. Angry at God, at the universe, at cancer, sometimes even at you for leaving us. I was drowning, and I didn't know how to ask for help. I thought being strong meant doing everything alone. I was wrong. You knew I'd need help. You knew I'd be too stubborn to ask. So you left us a lifeline, a safety net made of your love and foresight. Margaret came at exactly the right moment, like you sent her. Maybe you did. I believe in miracles now, Sarah. I believe love is stronger than death. 6 months later, Dennis walked across the stage at the community college, receiving his electrician's certification. In the audience, Emma sat on his mother's lap, clapping wildly. Margaret was there too, beaming with pride. Dennis had a job lined up already, good pay with benefits. The apartment was no longer a place of desperation, but a home. Emma thrived in preschool, making friends, learning, growing. Dennis still wore his wedding ring, but now it didn't feel like a weight. It felt like a promise kept, a love honored. He'd learned that strength wasn't about refusing help. It was about accepting grace when it came. That love didn't end with death. It transformed, finding new ways to protect and provide. Every night, he tucked Emma in and told her a story about her mother, keeping Sarah's memory alive and vibrant. 1 year after that midnight knock, Dennis and Emma visited Sarah's grave. Emma placed fresh flowers on the headstone while Dennis stood silent, hand resting on the sun-warmed marble. "We're okay, Sarah," he said softly. "We're more than okay. We're happy. Emma's growing up strong and kind, just like you. I'm building a good life for us. I finally understand what you tried to teach me, that accepting help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. That love doesn't end, it just changes form. You're still taking care of us, every single day." Emma slipped her small hand into his. "I told Mama about my new friend Amy and how I got a gold star at school." Dennis squeezed her hand gently. As they walked back to the car, the sun breaking through clouds, Dennis felt Sarah's presence like a warm wind at his back, pushing him forward into the future she'd secured for them. Love, he now knew, was the only thing that truly lasted, the only miracle that mattered, the only grace sufficient for all things.